All right. Watching Sportsnet, which without McCown is just weird, and Tim and Sid without Tim or Sid is better. I think Jay Sharman is exactly what they needed. I think it's funny they were talking about Tulowitzki and how he's apparently finally comfortable in Toronto, and Jay Sharman just shut it right down. He's like, that's just crap. He's a professional athlete. It shouldn't take him a year to get used to playing in a different city. I thought that was pretty funny. And then there was some backtracking by him after because people are explaining why potentially, but you're being paid big money to play baseball. Be comfortable. Anyways, um, today, well, it was something I was reading in my 1986 yearbook. Yeah, I'm wearing San Jose today. I haven't worn that one in a while. Of course, Sharks fans like, he's got a San Jose jersey. Yeah, I've had this since last summer. There's something I was reading in this, and I made mention in a video a while back about how hockey players don't have the character they used to. They're censored, and everybody gives pat answers. And this book really shows it. Really, really shows it. This is still the hockey news. This is all the same. Ooh, um, a little bit of history here. Kent Nilsson was a Swedish player who played for the Calgary Flames and was known as a non-hitter, a non-physical presence, and when the games got physical and difficult, he would disappear. This is the 86 yearbook. This is before the 85-86 season. After 85, Calgary traded Nilsson, and they traded him for draft picks. He had 99 points that year. Now, I want you to think about where we're at right now, where Nathan MacKinnon just got $7 million a year, Scheifele got $7 million a year, 8 years, or $6 million a year, 8 years, and Bernier just got traded. And I will get to that. Okay, I'll get to the Bernier trade in a minute because it speaks to exactly what I'm talking about here. All right. And I'll go through this because it's the Minnesota North Stars. And this was around the time when I was really, really into hockey. And I was really, really frustrated that my favorite teams, Boston, Minnesota, Vancouver, weren't better. Although at this point I wasn't a Boston fan quite yet, although I was a huge Ray Bourque fan. Loved Ray Bourque. I thought he was just amazing every time I watched him play. And to this day, still the best defenseman I've ever seen. I understand he's gone through a DUI thing, but he's been retired for a long time, and I think if the number of people I know who drive or have driven drunk got arrested for it, and if they were publicly shamed for it, it's more common than people want to admit. And he should know better. And I really don't think it'll happen again. Because Ray Bourque's got a certain public profile, and he's been really kind of squeaky clean his whole life. And for this to happen now, it's got to be embarrassing for him, and it should be. And I'm make no excuses. There's no excuse for that. But have I ever driven drunk? No. Have I been in a car with somebody who's drank too much? Yes. There have been times in my life, mainly when I was in my 20s, when I was in a vehicle with somebody who I knew was not safe to handle a vehicle. And if I hadn't also been inebriated, I wouldn't have got in a vehicle with them, and I would have stopped them from driving home. These things happen. So again, no judgment, but no absolvement of guilt either. And he's taken his punishment. He gets a year probation, and that's fine. He has no previous record, and there's no point in putting him in jail for a year. So, all right. But back to Kent Nilsson. Kent Nilsson got traded to Minnesota because Calgary went in a different direction, and it worked. In 85-86, they went to the final, lost to Montreal, and then in 89, they went to the final again, and they beat Montreal in two of the best Stanley Cup finals I saw when I was a kid. They were just awesome. And 86, that's Patrick Roy's rookie year, and what's funny is in the Montreal bit in here, he's barely even mentioned. The Flying Frenchmen are suffering an identity crisis, and it was because in 84-85, Guy Lafleur retired near the start of the year, and the team just seemed gutted at that point because he was this huge superstar, and then almost overnight, the game was ahead of him, and he quit. And it took a year and a half, I guess, for them to get back to the Stanley Cup. All right. There's no more enigmatic team in the National Hockey League than the Minnesota North Stars. Newcomer Kent Nilsson should feel right at home with them. One of the most highly skilled players in the game today, he nonetheless has failed to live up to expectations. Does that sound familiar to North Stars followers? Yeah, it did. All too familiar, we suspect. And I remember at the time Nilsson went to Minnesota, I was like, yes, this guy scores all kinds of points, and no, he doesn't hit, but it's fine because Minnesota's got all these other offensive forwards, and they'll gel, and this is going to be great. And it was a tire fire, which makes it highly appropriate for Lauren Henning, a man who parlayed marginal skills into an 8-year NHL career, to take over as coach of the North Stars. He replaces Glenn Somner, who was named interim coach after the dismissal of Bill Mahoney early in the season. It's the who's who of coaches in the Minnesota North Stars. Henning's coaching career began with the Islanders, for whom he played 3 years ago as an assistant to Al Arbor. He took over the Springfield Indians last season when the Islanders hired Brian Kilrea for their assistant's job. Brian Kilrea, the famous coach of the Ottawa 67s, who chose the CHL over the NHL, and it made a lot of sense. I gotta respect the guy for doing that. First choice for the Minnesota job was native son Herb Brooks, who was widely expected to join forces with old friend Lou Nanne, the North Stars GM. But contract talks reportedly hit snags, and Brooks, the people's choice, was ruled out of the picture. It is Henning's job to turn a team of underachievers into something more closely resembling achievers. Not even looking for overachievers, just achievers in Minnesota. A good departure point would be Nilsson, who was acquired from Calgary for 2 draft choices. Nobody with career numbers of 562 points in 425 games, like his, has taken so much abuse. Maybe there should be an asterisk beside his name. Most bad seasons with 100 points, said Lou Nanne after the trade. Sure, he has deficiencies, but don't kid yourself. Every team has deficiencies. If he worked hard every night, they wouldn't have traded him. What is it they say? Only Wayne Gretzky has more talent? The GM trading for him just shit all over him. Think about that for a second. Just imagine Mark Bergevin going up and going, well, we traded Subban for Weber. Weber's slow. His underlying numbers are really kind of the shits, but we're hoping that maybe he'll do something here. I don't know. Whatever. Press conference over now or what? Can I go? They also say Nilsson doesn't respond well to tight collar situations, which is, pressure. Particularly the playoffs when the Magic Man regularly seems to disappear, and his nickname was Magic Man, and the magic became that he would perform a disappearing act like David Copperfield in the playoffs. He was expendable, explained Flames coach Bob Johnson. Badger Bob. We weren't building our team around him. We tried that. It didn't work, did it? We're going a different route, the honest effort route. So that's a little more dirt on the grave of Kent Nilsson. May he... Oh, wait, he's an actual player still at this point, and it sounds like there's 2 eulogies that have been given for his career. The North Stars had been building their brand around a young captain named Brian Bellows, but he had difficulties with the leadership role. Former North Star Al McAdam decked him at one point during the 83-84 season. I loved Al McAdam. I did. He was a Canuck at one point, and full respect for... This guy's our leader? No, I don't think so. Just boom. I just picture him like BX of Fedorov, just one punch, Bellows goes down. He also had trouble on the ice last season, scoring just 62 points. That was a career low total, just like those turned in by Neil Broughton, Steve Payne, and Dino Ciccarelli. It was a bad year for Minnesota that year. They couldn't possibly be so bad 2 years in a row, could they? Dependable players of Keith Acton's ilk and a solid contribution of Tony McKegney should help reverse the slide that left Minnesota with 26 fewer points than the season before. Veteran Dennis Maruk, the second leading scorer last season, and sophomore Dirk Graham are 2 other returning forwards. I forget all the time that Dirk Graham started his career in Minnesota, and it looks so weird to see that in print, because he was in Chicago a year later. Left winger George Sevenins left RPI to join the North Stars during the offseason. Prospect Ken Hodge Jr., son of the former NHLer, had a terrific rookie season with Boston College, but he won't be joining the Stars for some time yet. In reality, he never joined the Stars because he became a Boston Bruin. and he was one of my favorites in the early 90s. North Stars officials wish they could speak as glowingly of Brian Lawton's progress, but the number one overall choice in 1983 has struggled during his first 2 pro seasons, a good part of which has been spent in the minors. He has just 15 goals to show for 98 NHL games. Lawton, however, is only 21, so he may turn it around. I don't know. Lawton, ask Stamkos about Lawton. All right, I digress. K Blue Liners are Captain Craig Hartsburg. Never a bad word have I spoken about Craig Hartsburg. Kurt Giles, same for Giles, and Gordy Roberts. Fantastic veteran defenseman. Gone from the goaltending picture, which includes Don Beaupre, Rolly Melanson, Mike Sands, John Casey, and Finnish national Kari Takko, is 7-year NHL or North Star Jill Malash. I think Malash went to Pittsburgh after. I should have looked this up before the video, then I would have looked really smart. No, he traded to the Edmonton Oilers. What? He left behind some thoughts on Minnesota's regression as a hockey team. I forget that Malash ever played in Edmonton. That is so weird. Louis the Boston, he can do it. Now this is Phil Malash talking about the Minnesota North Stars. Louis the Boston, he can do what he wants. There's a lot of rebuilding to do with the North Stars. 3 years ago, we were a team that didn't need much, maybe 1 or 2 changes. Instead, we've made 4 or 5 changes every year, and obviously they weren't the right ones. It's been proven with this team that hard work doesn't matter. There were conflicts inside the team, and it comes from the top. A couple of key players are not on best terms with each other. Mike dropped by Joe Malash. Picture that with the current NHL team. All Subban said is, I feel closer to the Stanley Cup now than I did a day ago. And Montreal melted down. Montreal melted down. Joe Malash right there. If that was said by an NHLer now, holy crap. The burial in that article, Minnesota North Stars, is so beautiful. The burial of Kent Nilsson, who they just acquired, and then the burial of the team by the veteran goalie who's leaving the team. He buries Nanny buries Nilsson, and Nilsson buries everybody who plays with him, just by association. It is this magical, wonderful thing. See, this is why I order these old books. It's a moment in time. It is a time capsule, and it is something that you can't get by reading on the internet. You know, some bullshit stats website. This is the reality. Kent Nilsson, as I remember it, had a brutal year in Minnesota. He was only in the NHL, I think, for 2 more years after that, and then it was out you go. And he was the only player I ever saw who could score a point in every game and still be terrible. And it didn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense. They traded a 99-point player, their number 1 scorer, for 2 draft picks. Like, here, take him. And that's what the Leafs did today with Jonathan Bernier. Again, I absolutely love what Lou Lamoriello is doing in Toronto. The trading of Jonathan Bernier frees up cap space. So now they can look at if Sparks is ready to be the backup or Bebo's ready to be the backup, they've now got cap space to get 2 more players into that lineup. And I think that's where they're going with it. I think that's why this move was made early in the summer. I honestly feel like with where Toronto is, they're so much further ahead than they were before Lou got there. Bernier gets signed to a big contract, and at the time that contract was signed, Leafs fans loved it. Most of them before people start flaming me in comments. But most people are like, oh yeah, no, he's earned that. No, $4.5 million, no, he's earned that. Yeah, no, he's good. He's gonna be the starter for years to come. He put up great numbers in LA, great numbers in the American League. He's going to be a great goaltender for Toronto. Gone. So now it's probably going to be Anderson and Bebo unless they bring somebody else in. But, you know, Sparks played well enough in the call-up. I honestly would give him a shot at the backup job. I wouldn't panic to sign a backup. I honestly think there are a lot of qualified goaltenders out there, and you're never going to have a hard time finding a team willing to give away a goalie these days in the NHL. Just sit on it. Just leave it. Because somebody will be available 3 weeks before the season starts. And then you're probably picking up a guy that you can expose in the expansion draft, and you won't have to worry about it. It's not going to be a big deal. But the Bernier deal makes a lot of sense. The Ducks side of it is weird, though. So the Ducks traded Anderson for Bernier, basically, is what happened. I think Bernier will benefit from being in LA, or being in Anaheim, but what does this do to Gibson? Does Gibson become the starter and Bernier's just the backup? Because I don't think Bernier's going to be happy sitting on the bench and only playing 25 to 30 games a year. Does Gibson feel nervous knowing that the guy behind him has a lot more experience and gets paid more money? It's going to be an interesting year. I don't really have any opinion on the Scheifele and McKinnon contracts. The franchises think that's what they're worth. I guess we'll see. Of the two, I think the more risky might be McKinnon. McKinnon, his rookie year, looked like he was going to set the league on fire, and it really hasn't happened the way that it was supposed to. So I don't know. I want to say that it's going to be and yet Scheifele too. Scheifele's been pretty good, and he had a good second half of the season last year, so really can't say anything bad about Scheifele. It's just those long-term contracts, man. Those long-term contracts are just brutal. But that's the route the NHL's taking. That's the route the GMs think is the best way to go, and I'm not going to argue with them because Lord knows I've been wrong before. I've been right before, but I've been wrong before. So who knows? I will likely find more snippets in that 1986 book to read. That's why Don Cherry's the way he is, because that's the hockey league he comes from, where you can just say whatever, and you don't have to worry about Twitter and Facebook and shit. You can just say whatever you want. So that's the league that he misses. And honestly, that part of it, being able to honestly say how you feel about your teammates when you leave, being able to honestly appraise players, teams, GMs, and coaches, I miss that a lot. Because according to everything I read, every single player is really good. And there are no bad players left in the NHL. And that's just not true. Athleticism's higher than it was in the 80s, certainly. And there's more players from Eastern Europe and more American players than there was back in the 80s. So you could argue that in terms of talent from top to bottom, the league's better now than it was back then. But there are still bad players. There are still guys who score points, but they're really pretty useless out there. And I kind of miss when you could say it and not have to worry about a bunch of brushback. And I'm not talking about YouTube comments. I expect YouTube comments. I always read them in Morty's voice from Rick and Morty. Well, what about Arizona? You never mentioned Arizona. What about the Ducks? Why do you hate why do you hate the Ducks, Rick? Rick, what did they do to you? That's how I read them. And they honestly read them in Morty's voice when you see comments about me being an asshole on my channel, and they work. They work really, really well. At some point, this channel gets big enough, I promise I will do videos once a week where I go through the comments about me being a prick, and I will read them in Morty's voice, and it will be epic and amazing. It almost along the lines of the mean tweets thing that's now the big thing that they do on Jimmy Kimmel, but it's fine. Sometimes they have a valid point, and sometimes they're just not making a point. They're just spouting off, because it's fun to spout off online, I guess. All right, well, that's it from me for now. I will do more recording later. I would have done recording earlier, but I learned something last night, and I just want to give a public service announcement now while I can. Do not eat the following in a row. A can of almonds, then a bag of nachos with cheese salsa, followed by Twizzlers, followed by ice cream. Your stomach will unite with the rest of your body to try to destroy you from the inside. You will have horrible nightmares, disturbing nightmares, and you won't have a really good night's sleep. So even if you get 8 hours, it's going to be so broken up, it's terrible. And the cats will fuck with you in your sleep and make sure that you can't sleep comfortably. So you move your legs out of the way for the cats, and then when you wake back up, you realize you've got your legs in an uncomfortable position for no reason because the cat's left. So the cat's just like, we're going to fuck with him, and when he's asleep, we're going to leave. Then when he wakes up, we're going to come back, and we're going to make sure we push him off again. So there's that. Anyways, this was fun, and hopefully entertaining and educational, and thanks for watching.